Hey Dulles family, my name is Andrew. I'm the student pastor here, and whether it's your first time here, you've been here for a while, maybe last week, Easter Part 1 was your first time here, a big welcome. For those of you watching online, welcome as well. We're super excited that you are here for Easter Part 2. Now, one of the special things about today in Easter Part 2, at the end of Pastor Brad's message, we are going to be taking communion together. So if you're watching online and you haven't gathered some bread, grape juice, or wine, whichever you prefer, you can do that before the message so that we can all take it together today. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that tonight is wine and cheese. Now, wine and cheese is a casual gathering for those who it's their first time here. Maybe it's your first time here. You want to get to know more, learn about the church, meet Pastor Brad and Amy, some other church members. And if it's not your first time here, if you just want to hang out with some people, that's what this is for as well. So it's going to be at Pastor Brad and Amy's house from 5 to 6:30 tonight. The details are on the app. If you don't have the app, find a team member outside and they can tell you the address and all the different details you need for that. And then a save the date. Next month, at the end of the month for Memorial Day weekend, we are going to be having church at 50 West. It's a winery out in Aldi. So we won't be at Lightridge. We will be out 50 West for our church at the winery. Now, it's a save the date. There's no actionable items needed right now. Just pencil that in. Remember that. So we're going to be out there for that. Guys, I hope that you enjoy this last part of Easter Part 2. I hope that you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next time.
We're doing something different this year. This is Easter Part 2, as we're calling it. It's still not too late to find wine or juice. Bread or crackers will work for communion that I'm going to lead you in just a few minutes. Before I start my second Easter message here today, I want to just give you an update about Ukraine. The situation is obvious, but we have been wanting as a church to respond to helping refugees. There's going to be more information about this coming most likely next weekend, but we are going to be supporting a small town in Poland. The Panas family at Dulles, who've been with us for years, are from Poland, and this morning, live in person at Lightridge, I'm actually interviewing for a few minutes Wojtek. Wojtek was a pastor in Poland for a number of years, and one of his church members from a long time ago is a mayor in the town that we're not adopting the town, but we're really going to partner with this town in some ways as they do their best to support 350 Ukrainian refugees. So more information on this will be coming, I'm pretty sure, next Sunday, so stay tuned for that. Okay, again, if you're just watching or joining in here in the last few seconds, find wine or juice, some type of bread that serve as communion elements for us to share together here in just a few minutes. All right, if you're not a baseball fan, if you think baseball is boring, you're going to have to endure the next couple of minutes during this story. Maybe think of the baseball stadiums, equate them to like you having dinner with 2 or 3 of your favorite celebrities or something like that. But my dad is one of the biggest baseball fans I've ever known. I grew up playing baseball. I love baseball. My dad is like a major Uber fan. And so we've done a couple of road trips. The last year of Yankee Stadium, before they tore it down, the iconic Yankee Stadium, even though we weren't Yankee fans, we drove up in 2008 to New York for a game to experience the stadium. About 5 or 6 years ago, we drove to Boston to see a Red Sox game at Fenway Park. You know, these stadiums They're like American landmarks. At least that's how baseball fans think. But the heartbreaking story is that, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, my dad and I were in Chicago, and we got Chicago Cubs tickets. It happened to be against their arch rival, the Cardinals. But as big of a rivalry as that is, we didn't really care as much about that as we did seeing a game at Wrigley Field. And so we pull up to the front of the stadium as it's beginning to rain, and then the sky opens up, and we sat near the front of the stadium. There's a just legendary sign at the main gate of Wrigley, welcoming you to Wrigley Field, and that's close to where we actually pulled off in the hard driving rain. We could see the stadium, we could see the front of the stadium, and we sat there for at least 30 minutes. And I mean, it. When I tell a story like this so many years later, I want to say it's like one of the hardest rains we'd ever seen. It was raining hard for 30 or 40 minutes, and we just decided in the car, like, there's no way they're going to play this game today. It's going to get canceled. We saw some guys standing with umbrellas in this pouring rain trying to talk to cars. And we thought, they're trying to sell their tickets. Is that a thing? Like, can you unload your tickets? Would anybody buy them? If it's a makeup game, I guess somebody could use our tickets. So we pulled up to them, and they held their umbrellas over our windows. And we said, "Are you guys selling tickets?" And they said, "No, we're trying to buy tickets." And we were like, "To today's game?" And they said, yeah. And so we ended up selling them our tickets for what was going to be this rain out, kind of hoping. Well, we sold them cheap. I want to say $10 or $15 each, maybe. Thinking, this game will be made up, they'll be able to use the tickets. So we ended up deciding, let's go downtown, let's eat some good Italian here while we're in Chicago, which we did. And about an hour and a half later, after selling the tickets, we're in a restaurant in downtown Chicago, and we just happened to look across the restaurant at the bar, and the TVs had a Cubs game on. And so we were like, they must be replaying yesterday's game. And a little bit later, I got up to go to the bathroom, and I'm walking past the bar, and the Cubs are playing the Cardinals. And I was like, well, that's interesting. They're playing, I guess during the rain out. And I stopped and asked somebody, and the bartender or whoever I talked to said, no, they're playing the game. They had an hour and a half rain delay. And I was like, what? And the stadium looked full, and I get back to the table, and I felt like I was delivering like the worst tragic news to my dad. And he was like, what? We sat there heartbroken, and the stadium was full. We felt like we were the only ones missing this great experience that we wanted to be experiencing. And some strangers that we sold our tickets to for dirt cheap were in our seats. And it looked like we were the only ones that didn't stay for the game. And we just felt totally on the outside. We felt left out. We felt like we'd missed out on something pretty extraordinary that we had looked forward to. We were excited about all that summer, that whole summer. And I've seen this happen so many times. I've known so many people where the same thing can happen in our spiritual lives. As we think about Jesus, we think about an experience with God. When we consider the Easter story, it's so easy to feel that we're just not experiencing, or we've missed out on something that it seems like everybody else is experiencing, or it's easy for everyone else to believe, or faith just seems to be easy for my friends. But somehow there's been this disconnect, or somehow we feel left out, or that we've missed out somehow. We're going to look at a story here for a few minutes about the original Easter Sunday, but later in the day, while Jesus is appearing to people alive after his gruesome death, which we talked about last week. He's appeared to Mary Magdalene. He's appeared to the 12 disciples, the 11 disciples. He's being seen already on Easter Sunday all around Jerusalem, but two of his followers, not two of the 12 disciples, but two of his very close followers, because there were many in Jerusalem, two are walking home from the tragic events of Easter weekend. And we're told they live about 7 miles away from Jerusalem. And, in this series we've called Journey, for the past couple months, we've been journeying toward Easter weekend, toward the cross, toward Resurrection Sunday. These two followers of Jesus are on a journey in the story, and it seems that they're journeying in the wrong direction. So this is in Luke chapter 24. Now that same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were going to a village called Emmaus, which is their hometown, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. Now, if that seems strange to you, we looked at an instance of this last weekend, where Mary Magdalene is talking to Jesus in the garden outside the tomb and thinks he's the gardener. And similar to Mary's experience, we have to remember that Jesus' body was mutilated, and we got into some of that detail. And if you missed last weekend, that may sound morbid and like something you don't want to listen to. Listen to last weekend as we talked together about the relevance of how gruesome the cross was. These followers of Jesus obviously are coming from Jerusalem. They're overcome with grief and sadness about all the events that have happened. We're going to read a little bit about that. It's clear that they saw Jesus on the cross. And so their minds can't comprehend that this person who's walked up next to them is Jesus. You and I are used to the resurrection story, and we know that Easter is about Jesus' resurrection. That wasn't a thing for these two. That was impossible. So they're not thinking this is our Lord. This is our leader. This is the one who came and revealed himself as God. They think this is some stranger, so they don't recognize him. Have you ever felt like you've experienced something so challenging or so gut-wrenching or so confusing that either God has just not cared or God has abandoned you, or maybe God is not as powerful as you had hoped he would be? That has to be what these two followers of Jesus are feeling. In fact, they express it to some degree. So Jesus asked them, and this is sort of like a little bit of comic relief, like Jesus is almost playing with them a little bit. It's hard to not imagine that. Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. This is a description Luke gives us of them sort of stopping in their tracks, so shocked by the question, "What are we discussing?" One of them, named Cleopas, asked Jesus, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these recent days?" And Jesus just plays along. Now, he's prompting them into this conversation, of course, but he says, "What things?" Jesus is like, what things happened? About Jesus of Nazareth, they tell him. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel." Now, we learn through the rest of the story of Jesus and the rest of the New Testament that Jesus came to rescue all of humanity, all people. But of course, they, as Jewish people, are believing Jesus was the Messiah that would come rescue ancient Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. Now, that's significant to us. We know what happened on the third day. They're telling Jesus, "Yeah, it's been 3 days now. I mean, how did you not know this? Everybody's talking about this." And the sadness has just overtaken us after these few days. In addition, some of our women amazed us, meaning earlier in the morning. "They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." So Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken." Now, foolish sounds like a aggressive, angry word. Jesus is not ridiculing these two followers. He's not scolding them. In fact, we see his warmth and his patience and his love here in the rest of the story. Jesus is saying foolish, and it's an expression here in the context to say, how blind can you guys be? Meaning, you don't recognize me, and you don't recognize the story that was supposed to happen that the Old Testament scriptures have been preparing you for generations. That's what Jesus means here by how foolish. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets of the Old Testament, who each individual prophet, in addressing Israel and all the selfishness of Israel and the pulling away from God, they ultimately, each one were pointing to the coming Messiah, Jesus, the rescuer who would come, God who would come in the flesh. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, Jesus explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. It's interesting that, the Old Testament is a hard read. If you're new to faith, if you're new to church or new to the Bible, there's so many places in the Old Testament. It seems like there's portions where it's violent. There's so much emphasis on Israel. It's like Israel's God's favorite people of all the peoples and people groups. And what we have to remember is when Israel was called through Abraham, they were called to be a blessing. God's plan for Israel would be a tribe, a community of people that would be a blessing to the rest of the world. A group of people that would extend God's message and heart and character and love to the whole world. And they couldn't pull it off. They tried and kept reverting back to their own need for control, being their own gods, selfishly living outside of God's plan. And so all of the scriptures that are addressing Israel are ultimately pointing to the one who would fulfill the call of Israel, the one who would be the blessing to all nations. Jesus would come do what Israel could never do. And so Jesus, even starting with Abraham is asked at one point to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. And it's such a morbid story. And you maybe have tried to read the Bible starting in the beginning, and you get early in Genesis to the story of Abraham being asked by God to sacrifice his son. And you're like, how morbid is this? And it's so easy to put down the Bible or to stop reading the story of God because we don't understand it. And then by the time Jesus comes on the scene, we see that Abraham was stopped from sacrificing his son, and a ram was provided as the innocent sacrifice, all to prepare us and show us for generations what God the Father would do in giving up his own son as the sacrifice for the world. And then you get to Moses, and you see Moses as the one who would lead all people out of slavery, ultimately the slavery of our selfishness. And then we see story after story, the story of Ruth, the outsider to Israel, whose husband died and she was a widower, and the kinsman redeemer who would welcome her in as part of the Israel family, the family of God, and become the husband and caregiver, and how Boaz represents Jesus. And then David is the smallest and most unexpected king of Israel. Everyone thought it would be the older brother, the handsome brother, the strong brother, but Jesus is represented in David. In fact, Jesus would be born in Bethlehem, the town of David. We see story after story after story in the Old Testament, everything pointing to Jesus who would come to rescue humanity. And Jesus is actually taking them through story after story of the Old Testament scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." And so Jesus went in to stay with these two followers of his. Have you ever felt like you were journeying, you're trying to have faith, you're trying to connect with God? You see people around you excited or believing in God. It seems like faith is easy to them, but circumstances happen in your life, maybe a lost relationship or a financial crushing blow that you've experienced, or maybe some kind of sickness, or the sickness of a child, or the loss of a loved one, some kind of experience that so took the wind out of you that it left you feeling God isn't close to me. God doesn't understand. He's not responding. I think God maybe allowed this to happen, and he doesn't seem to be doing anything to encourage or to show me his plan or to show me how in the world he could be in the middle of this heartache I'm experiencing, or that I experienced. These two urged Jesus to stay with them and spend the night in their home. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And then he disappeared from their sight, which is interesting, but very similar to Mary Magdalene in the garden earlier that morning. Only when Jesus said her name did she recognize, "It is you. I saw you hanging on the cross, your body destroyed." And of course, the whole point of that we focused our Easter Sunday on last week was that Jesus took the ugly of our selfishness and our need for control. It was so grotesque compared to who you and I were designed to be, that the cross, to bear the weight of our selfishness, was grotesque. This is all part of God's justice in freeing you and me and forgiving you and me and giving us life. Well, similar to Mary not understanding how Jesus could possibly be standing in the garden with her talking 3 days after his death, not until Jesus breaks the bread and shares the wine with them and gives them the elements, the symbols of his broken body and his blood that dripped down from the cross, where their eyes opened to realize it's you. They were sitting with Jesus alive. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" Then they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened to them on the way to Emmaus and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. You know, for you and me, this is actually a week after Easter. It might seem confusing if you're just joining us, like, wait, they're still celebrating Easter, or this is Easter part 2. We decided to make this a 2-week celebration this year. And it's interesting that a full week after Easter on the calendar, and after we, as a country, as a world, celebrated Easter, you may actually be feeling like you're on the outside looking in. You may feel like, because of faith just being hard for you, nothing has happened in your life to compel you to believe that Jesus is who he said he was, like these two. Maybe you've experienced something crushing or something so difficult you just don't see how God could possibly be in it, like these two who watched their friend be crucified, their rescuer, their savior, the one who had proven that he was God here on earth with us, and all seemed lost. They were so confused. I thought God was moving toward my life and toward this world. I thought he was bringing rescue and hope and good. I thought that he was going to take away my own wrongs and wrongs from the past and my own selfishness. And now all is lost. And I'm so confused in my faith. And maybe you find yourself in just a crisis of faith because God has just seemed to be distant from you or never come close to you, or maybe because of what you've experienced. And I'm telling you from my own personal experience, from challenges that Amy has had in health crisis that she's had. I had a health crisis a couple summers ago where I was just asking God, what in the world is your plan in this? The financial challenges that we've had, starting a church and just starting a family, to loss of friendships. There's been so much heartache in our lives at times where we've just questioned God. Are you even seeing this? Are you close to us? Are you going to answer? Is there hope? Is there good? And what I have discovered is that it's often the journey in that heartache where Jesus has come closest to us. And sometimes we don't even recognize that he's guiding us, that he is actually on the journey with us. He is leading us toward our eyes being opened to what his plan is. And that when you thought that the worst had happened, or the lowest had been experienced, or the most broken that you've ever felt, Jesus turns it on its head and shows you the beauty that he's been building, the hope that he's been preparing you for. And so this morning we come to the communion table. And I just have to believe that some of us, and to some degree all of us, every one of us, our eyes will be further opened to the reality of Jesus as we contemplate his body that was broken in such an ugly, horrific way because he took from us. He came to experience our ugly, our broken, our selfishness, our need for control, and the broken that's been done to us, the broken we've experienced. That he would come to replace those things, to take off of us what we felt was hopeless, or the thing that we've done, or that moment in our past that we have felt defines us, or we can never outlive. Jesus came to bear all of that, to take all of that on himself on the cross, in his broken body, so that you and I could be whole, so that we could have the life that would walk out of the tomb, making us alive and building character in us and making us the image of God in the hope to friends and people around us that they so desperately need. And so may our eyes be opened at the broken bread and the chalice or cup of wine that is shared with us, as Jesus reveals his ultimate plan in rescuing us to make us whole out of our brokenness. So because of what Jesus has done, the remarkable that he's done, to stand in our place, to bear the unimaginable in our own choosing, the unimaginable and heartache that's been done to us that we've experienced, he bore it on the cross so that you and I could begin to live in whole life, full life, life that never ends. And so Jesus, we're just in awe of what you've done for us. Take the bread with me and let's eat together. And Jesus shared the cup, something that was a luxury, shared at special dinners, represented something so gross. And in the Jewish custom, they understood that it was a replacement of some sort of the lambs, the innocent lambs that were slaughtered in sacrifice for the sins of humans. That Jesus had become the lamb. And the two followers on the road to Emmaus, sitting in their home that night, their eyes were opened to the reality of what Jesus had done. He had become the lamb. And so may our eyes and our hearts open to the reality that Jesus has become the sacrifice for everything that has held us back, that tempts us toward an identity that is so far less than what he's designed us to be. Because of our rescuer giving up his life, we celebrate by drinking together. I want to leave you with this final challenge here, that I'm going to reread the last few verses of this story. After dinner together, and after he broke the bread and shared the wine, and their eyes were open, and they said, didn't our hearts were burning within us with passion as Jesus, who we know now as Jesus, opened the scriptures to us and explained how everything has been leading to him. they got up, the two, following this dinner, got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. They didn't walk this time. In reverse, going back to Jerusalem, they're like marathon runners, I'm sure, sprinting. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together, and they're sharing. Simon has seen Jesus alive, and the two of them are saying, we did. We just saw him and ate with him. And so the journey doesn't end at the table. In fact, the night before Jesus' arrest and crucifixion, at the Last Supper, Jesus tells them, now you go and do likewise. Love one another, serve one another, serve those around you. And it's interesting to me that the journey for these two, like you and me, doesn't end at the table where we consume the forgiveness and the good and the life of Jesus just for us. They got up and ran. They got up and went. And this is where our journey now, to those around us, to our neighbors, to those who are hurting at work, family members, we now journey toward with our story of rescue from the broken and the unspeakable and the regrets and the shame, what our God has done to welcome us into his family. We now share with others. Dulles family, wherever you're watching from, I love that we are family together. We are the tribe of Jesus Church, his movement in this world together. If you're anywhere near the Dulles area, in about a month, we're going to do this again at a winery here in Aldi. We call it Church at the Winery. We'll have more details coming about that soon. I love you guys so much. I'll look forward to seeing you next weekend.